Zhukov, Why Stalin Exiled His Greatest War Hero. In the spring of 1945, one man stood as the celebrated savior of the Soviet Union. His name was Georgy Zhukov, the military mastermind who had orchestrated the crushing defeat of Hitler's armies. He was adored by the people, and his soldiers revered him. Yet, just months after this hero's welcome, he would be stripped of his titles, publicly humiliated, and banished to a forgotten corner of the empire. He wasn't brought down by an enemy army, but by the deep-seated paranoia of a single man, Joseph Stalin. So why did Stalin turn on his greatest war hero at the very moment of his triumph? The rise of a hero. To understand the fall, you first have to understand the rise. Georgy Zhukov wasn't born into power. He was the son of poor peasants, a man forged in the fires of war and revolution. He joined the Imperial Army, fought in the First World War, and then sided with the Bolsheviks during the Russian Civil War. Right from the start, he showed an uncanny genius for command and a ruthless drive for victory. But his real talent was for a new kind of warfare. Years before the world learned the term blitzkrieg, Zhukov was perfecting it. In 1939, on the remote plains of Mongolia, he was put in command at the battles of Khalkhin Gol. Facing an aggressive Japanese army, Zhukov unleashed a symphony of destruction. He coordinated hundreds of tanks, massed artillery, and air power in a massive double envelopment that absolutely crushed the Japanese forces. It was a groundbreaking victory that not only earned him the title Hero of the Soviet Union, but also sent a clear signal to Tokyo. Never test the Soviet border again. More importantly, it got Joseph Stalin's attention. Stalin was a man who ruled through fear. By the late 1930s, his Great Purge had decapitated the Red Army, executing tens of thousands of its most experienced officers on trumped-up charges of treason. In this environment, competence could be a death sentence if it came with even a hint of disloyalty. A man like Zhukov, who was both brutally effective and appeared completely loyal, was an invaluable and dangerous tool. And in 1941, Stalin needed that tool more than ever. When Hitler betrayed their non-aggression pact and unleashed Operation Barbarossa, the Soviet Union began to buckle. The German war machine seemed unstoppable, swallowing hundreds of miles of territory. As panic gripped the Kremlin, Stalin turned to Zhukov. Sent to the collapsing front lines, Zhukov was a force of nature. He was harsh, demanding, and unforgiving, known for his iron will. But he got results. His defining moment came at the gates of Moscow in the winter of 1941. With German soldiers reportedly able to see the spires of the Kremlin, Zhukov took command of the city's defense. He masterfully redeployed battle-hardened divisions from Siberia, troops available thanks to his earlier victory against Japan, and on December 5th, he launched a counteroffensive that stunned the world. The unstoppable Wehrmacht was not only stopped, it was pushed back. For the first time in the war, Hitler's armies were in full retreat. Zhukov had saved Moscow, and in doing so, he had saved the Soviet Union. His name was no longer just known in the Kremlin, it was now on the lips of every Soviet citizen. He was becoming a legend. The peak of power and the inevitable collision. Moscow was just the beginning. As Deputy Supreme Commander, Zhukov became Stalin's fireman, dispatched to every critical point on the front. He was instrumental in planning Operation Uranus, the brilliant encirclement of the German Sixth Army at Stalingrad, a defeat from which the Third Reich would never recover. He coordinated the titanic clash of tanks at Kursk and directed the colossal Operation Bagration, which shattered the German Army Group Center. With every victory, Zhukov's fame grew. He became a four-time hero of the Soviet Union, a marshal of the Soviet Union, and the face of Soviet power. To the soldiers in the trenches, he was the marshal of victory. To the Allies, he was the architect of the Eastern Front's brutal, grinding advance. He commanded millions and wielded power second only to Stalin himself. But in the shadow of this rising star, a dark jealousy was growing. Stalin demanded total credit for every success. The idea of a shared victory was foreign to him. He started to see Zhukov not as his most capable general, but as a rival for glory. While Zhukov himself never felt there was personal animosity between them, he later blamed Stalin's inner circle, men like the secret police chief Lavrenti Beria, for poisoning the dictator's mind against him. The narrative had to be controlled. The victory had to be Stalin's alone. The collision course was set, and the final symbolic clash came on June 24, 1945. This was the day of the great Moscow Victory Parade on Red Square, the crowning moment of the Soviet Union's triumph. The honor of inspecting the troops traditionally belonged to the Supreme Commander Stalin. But according to legend, Stalin wasn't a skilled horseman and knew it. Rather than risk public embarrassment, he turned to the one man whose prestige was undeniable. He ordered Marshal Zhukov to take his place. And so, as Stalin and the Politburo watched from Lenin's mausoleum, it was Georgy Zhukov who rode out onto Red Square on a magnificent white stallion to review the victorious Red Army. In that moment, for the whole world to see, Zhukov was the victory. For a man as pathologically paranoid as Stalin, this was more than just an honor. It was a threat. As captured Nazi banners were thrown down at the foot of the mausoleum, Stalin was reportedly already plotting his hero's downfall. The story of Zhukov and Stalin is a masterclass in the politics of power and paranoia. It shows how even the greatest heroes can be brought down, not by an enemy, but by the very system they fought to protect. To make sure you don't miss our next exploration of history's most dramatic power struggles, take a moment to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon, The Exile and Legacy. The fall was as swift as the rise was glorious. In 1946, the hammer fell. Zhukov was accused of Bonapartism, the ultimate political sin in the Soviet Union. It was a charge suggesting he was a military strongman with political ambitions, a modern Napoleon who might use his popularity with the army to seize power. The state security apparatus, under the command of Stalin's crony Lavrenti Beria, went to work. Zhukov's subordinates were arrested and tortured, forced to sign confessions implicating the marshal in a conspiracy. His apartments were searched, revealing train cars full of furniture and art he had looted from Germany. While this was common among high-ranking officers, it was now weaponized against him as proof of corruption. He was stripped of his command of the ground forces and exiled to the Odessa military district, a significant demotion designed to get him far away from Moscow's center of power. But Stalin wasn't finished. Soon after, he was demoted again, this time to command the remote Ural military district, an assignment that was little more than internal exile. His name was scrubbed from official histories, and it was forbidden to hang his portrait in military buildings. The Marshal of Victory had been systematically erased. In his memoirs, Zhukov wrote of the absurdity of the charges, stating, "They sank to such obscene and disgusting depths as to accuse me of masterminding a military plot against Stalin." He was left to live in obscurity, spending his days fishing and hunting, a hero put on ice. In a strange twist, just weeks before his death in March 1953, Stalin recalled Zhukov to Moscow, perhaps realizing he might need his greatest general for a potential new war. But the dictator died before any new orders could be given. With Stalin gone, Zhukov's star rose again. Recalled to Moscow by the new leadership, he became Deputy Minister of Defense. In a moment of supreme historical irony, it was Zhukov who personally arrested the man who had orchestrated his downfall, Secret Police Chief Lavrenti Beria. By 1955, under Nikita Khrushchev, Zhukov reached the peak of his political power as Minister of Defense. But his prominence was, once again, his undoing. Khrushchev, like Stalin before him, grew wary of Zhukov's power and influence. In 1957, he too accused Zhukov of creating a cult of personality and forced him into retirement for good. So why did Stalin exile his greatest war hero? The answer is simple and terrifying. He couldn't share the stage. Stalin's entire regime was built on his personal cult of personality, the idea that he, and he alone, was the infallible leader and the architect of victory. Georgy Zhukov, with his immense popularity and undeniable military genius, became a competing symbol. He represented a truth that Stalin couldn't tolerate, that the victory over Nazism wasn't the achievement of one man, but of the millions of soldiers who fought and died, led by brilliant commanders like Zhukov. He was exiled not for being a traitor, but for being too much of a hero. Zhukov spent his final years in quiet retirement, his name and image slowly restored under Leonid Brezhnev. When he died in 1974, his ashes were buried in the Kremlin Wall necropolis, a final complex honor for the man who had saved the Soviet Union. His legacy is that of a ruthless and brilliant commander who achieved some of history's greatest military victories, yet was ultimately a victim of the paranoid totalitarian system he so effectively served. He was the indispensable man who, the moment the war was won, had to be made to disappear.